Welcome, welcome, everyone. Eileen Day McKusick is an independent researcher who has been studying health and human potential for the past 35 years. Creator of the pioneering sound therapy method, biofield tuning, she has been studying therapeutic sound since 1996. Through her work with tuning forks, she engaged in a systematic study of the body's electrical system in its entirety to discover how the clarity, strength, and coherence of this system plays a critical and overlooked role in our overall health and energy levels. Through her understanding and application of the principles of electric health, Eileen transformed her own health, energy levels, and performance. In her new book, Electric Body, Electric Health, she shares the insights and practices that have helped her and thousands of her students and clients to achieve their electric potential. Well, that's the public blurb, but what you might not know about Eileen is she has been a prolific artist since childhood in many different mediums, including food, business, healing, theater, photography, the written word and spoken word, and most recently, music. Following strong inner guidance to learn to sing at age 20, Eileen had 5 voice teachers tell her that she was incurably tone deaf before she began to figure out how to solve the problem with tuning forks. After spending the past 25 years learning directly from the forks about how sound interacts with the human electrical system, she has brought her focus back to the voice and music. Eileen recently began learning electric guitar and collaborates as a singer-songwriter with the brothers Corin, with plans to release an album in late 2021. As I am fond of saying, we are not one-dimensional beings. Let's give a warm welcome and open arms to Eileen Day McKusick.
Thank you so much, Sheila. I don't know where you got that introduction, but I need a copy of it. That's great. Thank you. So I guess, do we need to pin me? Am I pinned already?
You are pinned.
Okay, good. So I'm good to go. All right. Well, hello, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here with you and to be speaking with you about electric health. This is a pretty new subject. In fact, I got the domain electrichealth.com for 99 cents. So I have a habit of being sort of out ahead of the curve. I'm that type of person who's always first in line at the buffet at any kind of event. I just like to get where I'm going and, take care of things. And I'm always looking for the easiest way and the fastest way, the simplest way to solve problems. Solving problems is something that I became very good at with tuning forks. So there's a lot of background I want to give you. So I think what I'm going to do is go to my slideshow and we'll take it from there. So I'm going to share my screen and walk us through an introduction to this whole idea of electric health and what it is and how I came to learn about it and what I'm going to share with you today about electric health. And then you probably know I'm doing a workshop tomorrow as well, and we'll go a lot more in depth then. So let me give a try to share my screen and see how that goes. All right. Okay, so the topic is electric body, electric health. So for those of you who aren't familiar with me, I am the creator of the sound therapy method, biofield tuning. I started working with tuning forks 25 years ago, and over time developed this method. I started teaching it in 2010, and I have trained many teachers. We have over a dozen teachers, and we've trained thousands of students around the world. And we have an online certification program. 2020 forced us to go online. And we also are going to start in-person classes again coming up in the fall. So, and this is, for people like you who are already sensitive to feeling energy and getting insights. As you'll learn as I go, biofield tuning really plays to your strengths. So I'm also the author of 2 books, Tuning the Human Biofield, which is based on my master's thesis that I wrote as an adult student at Johnson State College in now Northern Vermont University in 2011. And then Tuning the Human Biofield came out in 2014. And then Electric Body, Electric Health came out in January of this year. I'm also an inventor. I've invented a number of tuning forks, a line of forks based in the Schumann resonance, the sonic slider being one of those, and that is 93.96 hertz, or the Schumann average of 7.83 times 12. So it's a tuning fork that I designed for people to use on their own, on themselves, for rejuvenation and for relaxation. And then I have other forks and fork accessories besides. I also founded the Biofield Tuning Institute, which is a nonprofit 501c3 that conducts grant-funded, peer-reviewed research on the biofield. So what is the biofield? Maybe some of you are familiar with that term. Basically, what I've come to understand is that our biofield is our body's electrical system in its entirety. And so I want to talk to you for a moment about that idea of the body having an electrical system, because many of us never really learn about that. It's one of those places where we haven't really been seeing the forest for the trees. So many people know that their heart is electric, and if you lose your rhythm, you get a pacemaker that helps with the electrical signal in the heart. Their brain waves are electric. If you get an EEG, they are measuring the electrical frequencies that have made it through your skull, right? And they don't stop at your scalp. So our brain waves and really all of the vibrations that our body is creating, right? Because everything that is in motion makes waves, and waves propagate. And so, we've all had the experience of getting a bad vibe off of somebody, right? We've all had the experience of getting a really good vibe off of somebody. How do we get those vibes? Where are they coming from, and how do we feel them? Many people don't know. There's lots of things that were omitted from our education, as I know. If you're here, you're a truth seeker, and you know that there are so many things that we haven't learned about. Of particular interest to me as a sound therapist was the discovery that all of our cells actually have little antennae on them called primary cilia. And these cilia house what are called microtubules, which are actually antennae that are both transmitting the information within the cell and receiving vibrational information from the body and from our environment. So what you have right there is the biological apparatus of what we call intuition, or our ability to sense vibes. It's not some sixth sense, it's not some mystical thing. It's how we as animals are built. And really everything in nature is constantly giving off and sensing vibes, vibrational information, right? So we have an electrical current that is going through our body and is being transmitted and received constantly on all of our cells. In every single cell in our body, every single system in our body is running on electricity. Not only is everything running on electricity, but anytime that we have an electric current running through anything, we have a magnetic field around it. And that's just a basic law of science. Now, the idea that the human body has a magnetic field has been rendered pseudoscientific or woo-woo. Energy medicine practices are dismissed as I just read an article. I didn't even know this. Something came out in November of last year that called biofield tuning tooth fairy science. That's a new one to me. I never heard that before. So this idea that anything that does that, like any kind of energy medicine, is the people who practice it and believe that it helps are actually delusional. Right. So, and this has been going on for decades, this sort of dismissal. But we don't know what the energy is in energy medicine. We don't know how it works. But it's actually really quite simple. We have an electric current running through us. It powers our heart, our brain, all of our functioning. When you're alive, your light is on, you're conscious, you're moving around. When you die, your light goes out. And the body's still there, but the light has gone out. Has anybody ever seen the light go out of somebody? Has anybody ever been there when somebody died and actually seen light go up? I had a beautiful 220-pound English Mastiff that we had to get put to sleep. And my husband and I both saw this cloud of light come up out of his body, right? That's your electrical body. We could even call it your soul. Kind of one and the same. This is the part of you that is conscious, that is you, that is individuated as you. And it's really the primary part of our aliveness. Not only the electricity that flows through us, but the magnetic field that surrounds us. In hands-on healing, if I have a good charge and am healthy, if I place my hands on you, electricity flows from areas of greater concentration to areas of lesser concentration. Again, this is a very simple law of science. There's nothing inexplicable about it when it comes right down to it. So the energy in energy medicine is electricity, plain and simple. And what I have discovered, my kind of own unique research, is that sound, like when I use a tuning fork produces actually a weak electromagnetic charge. And I've discovered that I can work in the body's magnetic field and shift that up. And I'm going to go into more detail on this in order to affect the rhythms, the patterns, the flow, and the expression of electricity in the body. And what is this but our mental health? How are we thinking? Are our thoughts harmonious? How are we feeling? What kinds of feelings are we feeling? Every time we feel an uncomfortable emotion, it creates uncomfortable waveforms in our body, right? And then we give off that vibe and people can feel it. But really, all of humanity is a collection of all of our vibes, what we are all experiencing electrically in any given moment. And what has happened to humanity as a whole is that we've gone wildly out of tune. What I've found as a person who tunes people, like people tune pianos, is that every single one of us has the potential and the blueprint for harmony within us. We're all designed to be self-tuning instruments in harmony with ourselves and in harmony with nature. And we are not currently in harmony with ourselves, in harmony with each other, in harmony with nature, in harmony with the cosmos. The reason why it's so difficult for us to have a sense of that connectivity is because there's a tremendous amount of noise, resistance, static, and signal jammers in our body's own electrical system. Okay? So my work is about bringing us back to our innate harmony. And through that connection with our own harmony, connecting with nature. Because everything that we need to be healthy comes from nature. All of the codes that can align our bodies into a state not only of health, but of supreme health, supreme potential, because latent in every single one of us is greatness. And this was a big surprise to me, okay? When I first started using tuning forks. And I'll tell you how that happened for those of you who aren't familiar with the story. I became interested in health and human potential when I was about 18 years old. And I started reading all kinds of books on science and spirituality, health and wellness, religion. I really became a big seeker. And I read and process information very quickly. So I was actually able to read many hundreds of books. I started off on the journey to heal myself because I was, like many young people in America, I mean, this is back in 1985, and it's so much worse now and harder, I think. But I was mentally, physically, and emotionally unwell, and I knew it. And I wanted to figure out how to get well. My driving North Star has always been the desire to experience freedom. Now, one of my favorite definitions of the word health is freedom. It's kind of an interesting term when you think about it, if you haven't considered that before. What does that mean? To be free of pain, to be free of debt, to be free of regrets, to be free to move freely, to be free to breathe freely, to be free to socialize freely. What does extreme freedom and extreme health look like, and how can I get there, and then how can I help other people to get there? And so this journey, and for those of you who are researchers, you know that you get interested in a topic and it kind of leads you down a rabbit hole, but then that leads to another topic, right? And then another rabbit hole. I'm sure there's a lot of rabbit hole divers here. I ended up in 1996 going down the sound rabbit hole, and I had I found and read books on the use of color and sound, music, basically vibrational healing. And back in the mid 90s, there wasn't a ton of stuff out there, but I found all that I could. This was pre-Amazon. And then after I got to the tail end of it, and it all made so much sense to me. Basically, if everything is fundamentally vibration, if matter and solidity is simply an artifact of human perception, but we're all fundamentally, and all of reality is fundamentally waves in space, vibration. And treating vibration with vibration struck me as very logical and elegant. And then all of a sudden, coincidentally, I got a catalog with a set of tuning forks for healing in it. And at the time, this was in 1996, I was doing massage therapy part-time. I had a few clients a week that I was seeing. I owned a very busy restaurant, but was more interested in transitioning to natural health and healing. The restaurant business is not good for your health, guys, especially startups. They're very bad for your health. And so I had a few clients that I felt comfortable enough with to ask them if they would be guinea pigs, and I started experimenting with the forks. Now, the set that I got was C, D, E, F, G, A, B. It was the C major scale, and it came with a little tiny instruction booklet that basically said you use C on the root chakra, D on the sacral chakra, E on the third chakra, and so on up to the crown, where you would use B. And that was pretty much all it said. So I activated the tuning fork and I held it over my clients. And I thought that a C was going to be a C, was going to be a C. No matter where I put it, it was going to sound like a C. But that is not what I discovered at all. What I discovered was that in certain places it would go very loud, and the vibration would be strong. In other places, the sound would disappear right away, almost like it was being sucked into the body. Some places it would go full of static, or others it would sound very sharp. So there was a whole surprising tonal change that was happening as I moved it around the body. Now, I remember telling people this early on and being dismissed by skeptics, and I've been dismissed by skeptics a lot, that what I was encountering was the Doppler effect and room acoustics. And I considered that, and I realized that that did play a role. But after seeing the same people in the same room multiple times and encountering very different signals, I realized that there was also something else going on. So there was one time when I was working with a person who had all of this pain in their shoulder. I held the tuning fork over the pain spot, and it went very loud and very sharp. And he was like, wow, that's what it feels like. And so I kept activating the fork and holding it over his shoulder. And after a pretty short amount of time, less than 2 minutes, I think, the tone softened and it was no longer that bright, sharp sound. When he got up off the table and he rotated his shoulder, he remarked that all his pain was gone, which was really surprising to both of us. Remember, I had no expectation of what was going to happen. And so this sort of thing started happening with my other clients. And I found that I would find these noisy spots and hang out in them until they settled down and equalized. But I also made the curious discovery that I could take these loud spots that I found and actually move them around with my tuning fork. I called it click, drag, and drop, because it was like I'd click into this loud spot and then I would drag it and drop it. And I thought, well, if it's going to be loud anywhere, it should be loud in the energy center, or the chakra, if you will. Now, any place that there is a chakra in this sort of traditional 7 energy center model, there is actually a nerve plexus. There's an area of greater electrical activity happening in these zones. So if you think about a nerve plexus and this idea of moving energy into it, my experience was it felt like the energy was sucked in to the body. And then it wouldn't be loud, like if I had been over someone's shoulder and I moved the loud spot, it wouldn't be loud here anymore. It would be loud in the middle. And so I developed this little practice of finding loud spots and just kind of moving everything to the midline. And people told me that they felt more relaxed, that they were sleeping better, that they were in better moods, that they had less pain. And then I stopped doing massage altogether, and I just started doing the sound therapy. Now you can imagine in Connecticut in the 90s, when I told people that I was doing sound healing on chakras with tuning forks, right? Like there's very few things that sound more kind of out there and kind of airy-fairy and sort of implausible and unbelievable than that. And a lot of people would say to me, oh, I never heard of that. Like there's this dismissal because they'd never heard of sound healing. So then I switched it to sound therapy. I still got blowback. And then one day I got smart and I started telling people that I was a researcher and that I was studying the effects of audible sound on the human body. And then they'd be like, oh, they're like, you're a scientist. Like, I approve. Like, what are you learning? So, I was doing the same thing, but using a different language that made it so that it was palatable for people instead of sound healing with tuning forks. So I did it as a hobby from 1996 to about, I think it was 2000. It was 2006 when I made a discovery that changed everything. So I only did like 1 to 2 sessions a week, sometimes weeks with none. I moved from Connecticut to Vermont, and I ended up starting a specialty food business making organic kettle corn. Who here knows what kettle corn is or eats it or enjoys it? I hadn't ever tried it, but I realized that you could get it at fairs and festivals, and people stand in line to get this stuff, but you couldn't buy it in stores. And so I brought the first organic kettle corn to stores in 2004. And I was diligently working away at that. I planned to blow it up and sell as Frito-Lay and retire. And that's what I was working on. When I had a client one day who came in, and she was in a lot of discomfort. She was experiencing pain and pulling in her jaw and her neck and her shoulder. And she'd been to a variety of different practitioners, acupuncture, chiropractic, osteopathy, acupuncture, and nothing had given her relief. So I was activating the tuning fork and holding it over, it was the left side, I was holding it over the left side, and I was listening to see if it sounded wonky or if it was loud over it, or if this sort of odd thing going on. when all of a sudden there was a loud noise out my window. And so I walked away from the table. I walked to the window. I looked out the window. I didn't see anything. I never to this day know what actually happened out the window. But for whatever reason, when I turned around and I started to walk back to the table, I activated the fork, and I was probably 6 or 7 feet away from her. And so I was walking towards her with my tuning fork activated when all of a sudden I hit a loud spot about 2.5 feet off of her neck. And as the fork went through it, it got loud, and then it came out the other side and it got quiet. And I was like, what is that? And I went back and I investigated, and sure enough, there was like a loud spot, but it was like hovering in space off of her neck. And I wasn't really sure what to do at first, but then I was like, well, all these other loud spots have just been moving to the midline, moving to the chakra. So I did that, and I, activated the fork. It becomes like a magnet, and it's a really weird feeling to like hook into something that's subtle, but you can feel it. Like when students start to learn biofield tuning, they're sort of universally surprised and delighted that they can actually find these areas of magnetic density in the field and move them around. Like, it's really strange. I did this for 15 years, guys, and thought it was weird. Like, all the time that I was developing this and figuring it out, it just struck me as so weird. And I didn't really even believe in it for a long time because it was so weird. And now I got thousands of people doing it. And it's kind of normalized in our circles at this point. But back then it was just really strange. And so I moved it all the way. I brought it all the way in. And when I got to her neck, it felt like it got sucked in. And, and then I wrapped up the session and I sent her on her way. Well, she called me the next day and she said, Eileen, all the pain and pulling is gone. She's like, I am completely relieved. And I was astonished. And I was also really curious. I was like, well, what just happened? And so the next clients that came in, I started with my tuning fork. My room had about 7 feet. And I started to explore what I now know as the biofield of the people who were coming in. And much to my amazement, I started to discover all of these sort of anatomical features within this field. I found things that felt like channels, things that felt like eddies, things that felt like walls or swamps or voids or areas of nebulosity. Like, there were all of these different textures and sounds that the tuning fork, when I was working out there. Now, when I worked over the body, I definitely heard changes in the forks and got sort of a feeling that like different tones or different feelings. But when I started working out in the field, it became even more pronounced. And so what ended up happening was my therapeutic outcomes became really dramatic when, just like that very first person, the ones that followed, many were equally dramatic. When people had been in pain for 30 years, it was gone in one session. Or people that had really strong anxiety disorders, like gone in just a few sessions. Depression, lifting, all kinds of reports coming in about like what seemed pretty miraculous. And I realized that like people are looking for this kind of healing. Like, who doesn't want to get unstuck from whatever is stopping you from being free in a way that's non-invasive, that's, doesn't require all of this talk therapy, that works on all of these different levels. I was treating people physically, getting them out of pain, removing swelling, getting inflammation down, resolving digestive issues and menstrual issues. I was getting people out of mental discomfort by discovering that, we've been taught that our brain is our mind, but really what I've come to see is that our entire electrical system, our entire biofield is our mind. Conscious, subconscious, ancestral information. A lot of the things that we struggle with, our ancestors struggled with the same thing. It's not just your problem, it's the problem that is expressing itself mathematically, rhythmically, and in a patterned way through the information field of your DNA. so many of the things that I have seen clients struggle with, and I've seen many thousands of people because it works in this sort of physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, ancestral, relational, like all these levels where we can get hung up. I helped many people, and then they tell their friends, and what happened was my practice became so busy that I couldn't sustain it. And so I discovered that I could do this at a distance as well, which was really surprising. I mean, I'm sure many of you do your dowsing work at a distance and you get it and you understand, but people would ask me if I could do it at a distance, and I was very arrogant about it. I was like, no, like this is sound waves on the body, people. Like, I'm not doing it at a distance. But then I ended up having to totally eat crow because somebody talked me into trying it. And much to my amazement, I was able to do what I had learned to do with the body, there, not there. And so what I had learned to do is this slide that I'm going to go back to in just a second. So over the course of about, I would say 4 years or so, from 2006 to maybe early 2010, those years, I actually mapped the terrain around the body, the sort of territory hidden in plain view, the biofield, and discovered that it houses all of our memories. So if you think about it, every experience that we have is translated by our body's electrical system, by our organizing intelligence, by our self, as a electrical signal. Everything we smell, everything we taste, everything, the brain, everything computes it electrically. So it would make sense that all of our memories are stored in our body's electrical system. And this is what I found exploring around the body, that when I hit these areas of resistance or noise, where the fork suddenly sounds super wonky, that was actually a very specific memory. That was an incident. The really stuck and noisy ones were like really traumatic incidences. And I started to observe this pattern that anytime I got into something that sounded sad, and just like music, if you and I were sitting and listening to a sad song, I wouldn't have to look at you and say, this song is sad. You'd be like, duh, Eileen, I can tell the song is sad, right? So it just sounds sad. And this is what was happening with the tuning forks. They'd get into these areas, they'd go atonal. And they would make me think of music and how music seeks to express the very fundamental vibrational aspect of emotion. So, and there's many different iterations of sadness. And I started to find that every time the fork would go into one of these, whether it was melancholy or loneliness or abandonment or like keening or wailing, there's all of these slightly different tonal expressions. I would always find those sad stories off the left shoulder. Anger has a particular sound that I could hear. All the angry stories were off the right solar plexus. Every time I encountered a sense where somebody was worrying about the future, I was finding it very specifically on the left side of the head. And so over time, what I've come to see as the biofield anatomy emerged. And for me, it was sort of like this blind fumble in the dark of sort of teaching myself this vibrational braille, and then having these moments of illumination where I would see patterns and start to see how it all fit together. Now, the amazing thing about the tuning forks is they aren't just diagnostic in that they find these memories, but when you stick a fork in an atonal zone in the body's electrical system, it provides the body with a kind of biofeedback of self-awareness, right? So we know that the body is designed to self-repair. If you cut yourself, it heals. Well, it's also designed to tune itself Like, who knew? So when you stick a fork in this very specific area and you let the body hear itself, remember a tuning fork is like a metronome in that it's producing a very coherent, predictable input. So that's something that the body can find its right rhythm against. It's also producing a pitch so that the body can hear itself. And when the body becomes aware of, is reflected that it's out of order and is given a tool to help put itself back in order, that's exactly what it does. It tunes itself. And generally, these traumatic experiences and memories have created areas of subconscious tension, deep subconscious tension in the body. Now, when we have tension that arrests flow, it creates inflammation. So any place you have inflammation or excess in one area, you end up with deficiency in another, and things start to go south. We want our body, we want our blood, our lymph, our fluids, our electricity. We want everything to be in a state of flow because that is health. And trauma creates tension and locks that stop that from happening. And the more tension there is over time, the more different ways the body can start to fall apart. So this is a way to go back into a person's memory banks and find the places where the system went into freeze, where the system went into a trauma response, and actually on a particular level, right? Because on one level, we're completely indelibly imprinted with life. Like your life happens, you had those inputs. But this is a way to go back to the way in which that memory is stored. Like when we talk about having charge around something, like, oh, every time I see that person, I get all like, ugh, right? And we can find exactly where that tendency is in your body's electrical system and discharge it. When the energy resolves into a more coherent expression, the part of ourselves, the part of our electrical system that's been frozen there releases and it returns back into circulation. And I've got a graphic I'll show you in just a little bit that shows that. So let's come back to this biofield anatomy map. And I just want you to think about, do you have pain or discomfort anywhere in your body? Or do you have any kind of zone where, let's say, one of the most common ones I see is the right hip going out. And what I discovered in person after person who had right hip issues was that they were all had in common a tendency to overthink and overdo. Overthink and overdo. Busy mind, busy body. If you've got issues with your left knee, maybe you're having a hard time letting go of the devil and maybe it's, you'd want to stop eating sugar or stop drinking wine, but you keep finding yourself back in it. You want to get out of a relationship that isn't working or a job that doesn't suit you anymore. Right? But you're kind of going back and forth and dithering about, should I stay or should I go? That's going to blow out your left knee. Left shoulder, if we have a lot of sadness or grief or loss, that left shoulder can get awfully heavy. And, you might get an MRI or this or that. There's nothing wrong with it. It's psychosomatic. It is your biofield in a bunch in that zone. And remember, these areas where energy is stuck in the field, that energy has mass. It has substance to it. And so if there's a lot of grief and loss weighing on you, it is going to, the magnetic buildup is going to draw electric energy. And so you're going to end up with too much voltage running through the wires, right? It's almost like a cloud is sitting on you and that magnetism is drawing the electricity to that part of your body. And you experience that as pain. It's very easy to come in with a tuning fork, to hook in to that, that pileup of energy and actually shift it, invite it and guide it to come into alignment and flow. I also discovered these two features that run down on either side of the body, the ancestral rivers. I found fixed points in the field on either side of the solar plexus, about 10 inches away. They're what feel to me to be like little discs or balls of energy. If I stick a fork in the one on the right, I can tell you all about the personality of your father, and I can tell you information about your father's lineage. Same with on the left side. I can tell you all about your mother and your mother's lineage. These seem to almost contain the information of our DNA strands. So the DNA that informs us from our father's side and our mother's side. And when I stick forks in these ancestral rivers, there is a feeling as if it is actually like if there's noise in the signal, it's almost like, remember, I'm sure all of us remember dialing radio stations or moving the rabbit ears around on the TV, and something's like slightly off or filled with noise, very often a consequence of trauma. The signal is not clear. But when we stay in the DNA stream with the fork, it does the same thing that the body does. It organizes itself. It gets the noise out of the signal. And that influence appears to go both upstream. So upstream is up above the head, and that feels like that goes back to our ancestors. And downstream, which passes, down past our feet, which feels like it goes to the descendants. Now, certainly from having worked with many clients, many people report that when they engage in a course of tuning, they see differences in their parents and in their children. So there is this feeling that as you shift your own vibe, that directly informs both directions in your DNA, which is kind of neat. Okay, so you might want to take a picture of this screen or a screenshot if you haven't yet. The other thing that I observed, so not only were there these zones that are almost like file drawers, like every time you feel this emotion, the record of it goes in this side or that spot. But I also found that as we generate information, it moves away from us. It moves away from our body. So in this model, the man is 60 years old. So that means that I would find information in his field related to age 30 about 3 feet away. If the field extends on average about 6 feet away, then now is close to the body, and birth is out at the outer edge of the field. So the outer boundary of the field, and we're going to talk about this in just a minute, like the actual kind of, well, what's going on with the field? Like, how does this even work? The outer boundary of the field contains information from gestation and then birth. So reading someone's field is kind of like dropping a needle on an album and reading the vibrational record of their life. Not only reading it, but modulating it as well, putting it in better order, tidying it up, grooming it, smoothing it out, helping it to enter into a state of relaxed flow. And then that impacts people's health. That's part of the most important thing. So what happened here with me in those years that I was exploring the field were two burning questions. And one was, what is this stuff that I'm moving, these loud spots that seem to have mass, that I'm able to move magnetically with a tuning fork? So I was like, do tuning forks create an electromagnetic charge? Like, does sound have magnetic properties? What law of physics is governing the fact that I can move energy, mysterious energy, around in the field? And so I ended up deciding to go to college as an adult to try to understand this phenomenon scientifically. When I realized that the work was beneficial, I also realized that I was still dealing with that image problem, and that the only way that I was going to be able to bring some validity to this very strange practice was if I got some degrees. And so I went to college as an adult, and I ended up writing master's thesis called The Effects of Audible Sound on the Human Body and its Biofield. And in it, I talk about my discoveries. So in a very timely way, and we all know how the universe is very good with timing, I was having a conversation one night with my son, he had just turned 12, and I'd given him some science books for his birthday. And he came to the table and he said, "Did you know that there's a fourth state of matter called plasma?" And I was like, solid, liquid, gas. It's like, no. Somehow, like, I missed a whole state of matter, right? How many of you have heard about the fourth state of matter called plasma, right? And now I started giving talks about this all the way back in 2011, 2012, and nobody had heard of plasma, like no one at all. Now I found that more people do. But at the time, it was this huge revelation. And in the same conversation, we were talking about, is space a vacuum? And I said, actually, I read somewhere recently that space is not the vacuum that we've been told that it is. I think that there's actually something there. And my husband was like, bah, he was like, space is a vacuum. Right. And we all tend to be that way with what we've been educated with and what we think to be true. Right. I think that it's very easy to become arrogant and dismissive, just like I was about doing this work at a distance. It was very arrogant and dismissive about it, in the same way that people are arrogant and dismissive about maybe what we do as dowsers or what I do, waving tuning forks around people. So we really always want to check ourselves when we find ourselves sort of mouthing off in that kind of way, because it's very easy to dismiss things. But none of us really want to be dismissed, right? So just something to keep in mind, where our assumptions lie and how much we stick to them and beliefs. Anyway, so after dinner, I went and I searched on the internet. I wrote, "Space is not a vacuum." And what came up was plasma. Now, this sent me into this love affair with plasma. I became so enamored of it that I could not stop reading about it. I spent the next 4 months reading everything I could find. And luckily the internet was so full of information around that it was easy. It was a lot easier to find cool stuff on the internet back when I was doing my research, 2010, 11, 12. It's a different world than it is now. But what I found completely changed my life for the better, and it wasn't what I expected. Now, for me as a seeker, as someone who wants to be free and healthy and know the truth, I had read so many different books and I had attended lots of workshops. I really spent a lot of time and a lot of money. But all the way back in 2010, I was not fit. I was overweight. I was chronically sort of low level chronic mid back pain, weak digestion, gas, bloating, heartburn, indigestion, short fuse, always fighting with my husband, just pretty much generally miserable, plus completely broke and totally in debt too. I mean, I had not become fit and abundant. And even though I'd had so many authors and workshops and things promise that to me, and I'm certainly a good student, but something was missing. And so I was still on the lookout, for what is missing. And so one of the things that I say is that the best self-help book I ever read isn't even a self-help book. It's a book called The Electric Sky by Donald Scott. And Donald Scott he was, and he's retired now, but he was a professor of electrical engineering. And he was also an amateur astronomer. And he began to observe that what they were telling him about what he was seeing out in space and what he was seeing in understanding his own electricity here on Earth, he started to see the parallels between what was going on up there and what was going on with electricity. And so he took a very deep dive and became affiliated with these fellows named Walt Thornhill and David Talbot, who started this organization called Electric Universe Theory. And what I learned from these guys was that electricity, not gravity, was the dominant force in space. And when you look at the electric universe model, it's much more logical and it just makes sense. And discovering plasma in the environment and in space and discovering that, like, wow, everything's electrical, helped me to understand that my body was also electrical, because I didn't get the electrical system in its entirety at all. And like, none of us are taught about it. You see like the heart, the brain, it's all seen in pieces. It's not seen as a whole system. So when I started to grasp plasma and how it works, it helped me to see and to understand our own electrical system. So I want to take some time to go through some slides to really introduce you into like what plasma is and how our understanding of it is like affects our work, the work that you do and the work that I do. So I'm going to come back to the screen share. And okay, so there's our 4 states of matter. There's actually 5, and the 5th one is ether, and I will talk about that a little bit later. So what is a plasma? Basically, it's when the electrons and ions are separate. And so what you have is a gas that's conducting electrical charge. And there's many different ways that plasma expresses itself. So our sun is a plasma. The solar wind, now we've been told that this is like a hot gas that's blowing at us, but it's actually a stream of electrically charged particles. Now we have our own, the Earth has its own atmosphere, its own biofield, and it also has a double layer membrane on the outer boundary that helps protect us from too much incoming solar radiation. So, and not only solar radiation, but interplanetary radiation, because all the stars, everything in the sky, everything is radiating. And space is not the empty vacuum that we've been told. It's actually full of plasma in varying densities and different kinds of expression. Now, we've been told that sound doesn't travel through space, right? Remember, space is this empty vacuum, there's no sound. But we have sound clips of like stars and the sun and stuff. And it turns out that sound really does travel through space. It travels through these Birkeland currents. Any places where there's dense plasma, sound waves travel through. They're called Alphen waves. So, you know, there's, I sort of uncovered one fallacy after another regarding our cosmological story. Remember that our cosmological story, Big Bang, basically says in the beginning was nothing, which for no reason exploded one day. And then there was a high degree of order for no particular reason after that happened, but it's been in an entropic dissolution ever since. It is a billiard ball particle universe that is gravity driven. And in order for galaxies to hang together with gravity, there has to be dark energy and dark matter pushing in from the outside and black holes sucking from the inside. So we have all of this darkness and separation and like darkness eating light. And it's all actually really depressing. Our cosmology is one of darkness, mystery, separation, entropy, and it's just pretty grim, right? And then here I am discovering, wow, that this isn't actually true at all. Like space is filled with like living electricity, and the same electricity that is powering the sun and the stars, excuse me, is also powering my own electric body. My own electric body. And so right there was that awareness of unity consciousness. Because if we're living in a world of solid, liquid, and gas, in a sort of dead universe, Everything is separate. Everything is dark. Everything is going down. And we all feel that way. We've all been programmed to feel isolated, to feel separate, to feel powerless, to feel disconnected. But that's not what's really going on. What's really going on is a universe of light and connectivity. And it's all one light, right? I mean, even science is like, oh, we can't even reconcile the forces of nature. You know, there's no unity to be found here. That's all a lie. It's all one thing. The whole universe is one great big electric organism, and we're part of it. It isn't about whether you believe in God or don't believe in God. It's that you are an electric being and you are part of a much larger electric organism. There's nothing to believe in or not believe in. It's just the way that it is. You know, just like you want your every cell in your liver to be on board with the fact that it's part of a larger thing and not go rogue and start misbehaving, exercising its free won't, and taking your liver south. You want every part of you to recognize and be entrained into the essential unity that is you. On a fractal level, we're no different. So here are these things that plasma forms, all these beautiful nebulas that NASA for years has called a hot gas. Like NASA and the sort of establishment cosmology denies the existence, or previously did, although it's definitely starting to change, the existence of the electrical force in the observable universe. So northern lights are when the sun sends a whole bunch more electricity and it activates our upper atmosphere and makes it glow. There apparently have been some really incredible ones lately. Lightning is also a plasma. If you've ever seen these, if you stick your finger on it, you become a conductor of electricity. The electric tendrils will come to your finger. Other plasmas, neon lights, plasma TVs, even the fire in your fireplace is a plasma. If you rub your feet on the carpet, that spark that jumps out of you is a plasma. Arc welders, things like that are all plasmas. It's everywhere. And what's interesting, and this is what Don Scott noticed, is that plasma is easily produced in a lab and its behavior is scalable. So how it behaves at the smallest level of scale is exactly reflected at the largest level of scale that's observable. And it's been known about for 130 years at least. It's been named. It was named a long time ago, and yet we're not taught about it. Most of us just don't learn about plasma, which is kind of weird because sources say that it makes up like 99.999% of the universe. Like it's ubiquitous, right? And yet we're blind to it. So it has particular characteristics. It forms filaments. So these are the filaments that are like lightning strikes, or the filaments that are in the Tesla ball, cells and sheaths. So if you think about the Earth's magnetosphere or our own biofields, right? So our biofield is a bioplasma. It is a magnetic fluid, a living magnetic fluid. High intensity electric current twists around. The positive and negative currents form a spiral, and really everything in nature moves in spirals. Sound, light, water, blood through your veins. This is the fundamental sort of torsion movement of life itself, is spiraling galaxies coming together. And then, you know, just like the Earth has its own atmosphere and plasma bubble, it's inside of the sun's heliosphere. Inside that bubble, you know, it's different concentrations inside the larger bubble of our galaxy, and then the larger bubble of our universe, and who knows what's beyond that. It has different ways that it expresses itself. So it has like a dark current mode. So our upper atmosphere has got a lot of plasma in it, but it's in dark current mode until it gets hit by a coronal mass ejection, and then it lights up into glow mode, kind of like switching on a neon light. Arc mode is when there's these filaments, sparks, lightning, that sort of thing. So the stronger the current, the brighter the plasma. Now, we have all been taught the thermonuclear sun model, and they've been trying to create this nuclear fusion in laboratories for decades and have failed. So our fundamental model of the sun is actually, I think, incorrect. I think the electric sun one makes a lot more sense, that it is a dynamic electric plasma powered by an unlimited universal power source and fed by intergalactic Birkeland currents. Now, if you've ever seen an image of space and you see the lines of light connecting the galaxies, maybe you've seen it side by side with like the brain and neural networks in the brain and been like, whoa, they kind of look the same. These Birkeland currents are what connects us, that the whole universe is interconnected and that this energy is moving around. It's not isolated individuals burning themselves out, right? Who's ever felt like an isolated individual burning themselves out? And if we can switch from that mentality to realizing that everything is connected and that we get our abundance and that we get our power through being connected to networks. And that's part of why you're all part of the dowsing community and attend the convention, is because you know that when this connection is experienced, that there's a lot more energy and support and a feeling of abundance and connection that comes from that, right? And it's fundamental to electricity. It likes to reach out and connect. That's what it does. That's just there for fun. Okay, I want to read this to you. This is an important quote. Years ago, I think maybe when I was 18 and I really first set out on this journey, I realized that the greatest problem we have is the illusion of separation. And it is from this illusion of separation, of being separate within ourselves. So many of my clients I've seen have been inwardly divided. Autoimmune disorders, there's very often self against self in some kind of battle of attack and defense, a victim of perpetrator. And then that becomes externalized in this sort of divide and conquer kind of experience that we're having in the world. And people are divided within themselves, divided against others, separate from nature, separate from the cosmos, separate from creation. That we all are laboring under this illusion of separation. And that if we could fix that, if we could change it so that people had more direct experiences of unity consciousness, when they would see that I am that, and as long as that is not okay, or this group of people is suffering, I can't be at peace, right? The whole idea of the bodhisattva is the individual that comes to enlightenment, comes to this awareness of the inherent connectivity of everything, and then comes back to help everybody else to figure it out, because we're all, there's only one of us here. And so the idea is to help people to wake up to that. And I think that this idea of waking up to just something as simple as a state of matter and not only the electricity in our cosmos, but in our bodies, and how it is all fundamentally connected. So I'll just read this quote. From the smallest particle to the largest galactic formation, a web of electrical circuitry connects and unifies all of nature, organizing galaxies, energizing stars, giving birth to planets, and on our own world, controlling weather and animating biological organisms. There are no isolated islands in an electric universe. Right? This is really important, that we not only see and understand, but like viscerally experience that sense of connection. When it really dawned on me, when it really sunk in, I was like, I can feel the song of the universe ringing in my cells. And as a seeker, that is what I had been looking for, a way to reconcile my yogic all is one kind of knowing with a scientific understanding and explanation of it as well. Because the science that I had been taught was a science of separation. And this was the science of unity. And it was such a relief to come across it. And then I never read another self-help book again after that. So this is just some fun images of how plasma interacts. So if plasma arises from the ether being the fundamental ground state of all of creation, it is everything that ever is, was, or will ever be. It's called the quantum field, the source field, the Higgs field, the quantum vacuum. It has a lot of names. And I use the classical term of ether because why not? But basically, ether is the same thing as the akasha. It's the luminiferous ocean of clear light that all of reality arises from, the explicate reality that we see, the implicate reality that was or is awaiting to arise. And ether polarizes itself into the positive and negative charges, the masculine and feminine, and then they chase each other around. and it is this dynamic dance of the positive and negative charges that give rise to the motion that is the underpinning of all of life. So now this was a really interesting thing for me to come across. I spent a semester, because I did an independent study on it, reading everything I could, and it wasn't until the 4th month that I came across telluric currents. So how many of you know what a telluric current is? So now I certainly didn't, but when I read about this, I was fairly astonished, okay? So telluric currents are electrical currents in the Earth's surface, and they run across the surface of the land. They also run underwater, and they're very filamentary, very much like how water moves across in like tiny little creeks and, you know, great big rivers. There's a whole variety of ways that water expresses itself. Same with these telluric currents. So they've actually all been mapped. And this blew my mind, the early telegraph system in this country ran on the electricity present in these telluric currents. Did you know that? Like, to me, that's just shocking. Okay, so when I read about them, and like I said, it took me a long time and a lot of digging to finally come across this. It's not information that's easy to find. I went looking for the maps, of course. I'm like, where are these things? I want to know. Well, it turns out that the oil and gas companies own all the maps of where these electrical currents flow, allegedly because it helps them to find oil and gas deposits. But I think it's because they don't want you to know that you got free electricity running like right here. Like, how do you stick a plug in it and tap that? You know, I think that's a lot of what Tesla was doing, was tapping into the fact that it's all around us. And I think part of why we didn't learn about Tesla in school is the same reason why we didn't learn about plasma or ether. Because if we knew that we were surrounded by free energy, why would we continue to accept internal combustion? Right? I mean, haven't we had enough of internal combustion already? So when I read about Birkeland currents and I started to grasp them, I was like, this sounds to me like the exact same thing as what we would call a dragon line or a ley line. Now, my understanding, and I want to be schooled on this if I'm wrong, because you guys would know better than me, but I read an explanation once that what we call ley lines are tamed dragon lines. The dragon lines being the naturally occurring sort of telluric currents that do their thing, and ley lines being these energies that have been harnessed through stone circles or through, what's it called when it's a thing that's straight up and down? Like the Washington Monument. I can't think of what those are called. And that by using these structures or cathedrals, that is how these energies have been harnessed or employed, by man. But either way, once again, we have a phenomenon that is completely explainable as natural electrical activity, and it's dismissed as pseudoscience, as nonsense, as woo-woo, right? It's really not at all. It's just it's just the magnetic field lines of the earth. So here's just some images, to see this sort of fractal nature, this idea that magnetic fields, if you sprinkle iron filings on a piece of paper that's over a bar magnet, you'll see it align in these fields of force into this toroidal shape. So whether it's around a magnet, whether it's around a human body, whether it's around the earth or the sun, anything that has an electric current running through it has a magnetic field around it. And these magnetic fields are always bounded. They have this membrane that bounds them. Also, we see this filamentary pattern that plasma also forms in. So you think about the meridians in the body. The double helix, the spiraling positive and negative currents. So we see that in DNA. We see it at the galactic scale in these currents that connect galaxies, or even in the sort of classical Vedic understanding of our electric anatomy, the Ida and the Pingala, which are considered masculine and feminine. Well, I've come to see them as the ascending and descending currents of our electrical body. So the feminine is the negative charge from the surface of the earth that we draw up, and the positive is the charge from the sun and the atmosphere that we draw down. And these charges spiral through us and circulate throughout our field. So this is what I was sort of talking about earlier, is that we're really disconnected in our awareness about our own electrical nature and the electrical nature of nature. That there's that it's been hard for me to educate people and get this electric piece to really sink in. In fact, when I was looking for publishers for Electric Body, Electric Health, I had a number of publishers say, she's known for her work with sound, and this is something different. And I'm like, no, like tuning the human biofield. Like, I've been talking about plasma and electricity all along. I have a video on YouTube from 2013. It's called Electric Universe. Like, I've always been talking about this. It's that it doesn't sink in to people because we've been so indoctrinated into chemical and mechanical. Something goes wrong with your body, you need supplements, you need a pill, you need drugs, you need surgery, right? I don't take any supplements at all. I'm 52 years old. I have extremely high energy, clarity, and focus, and I don't take a single supplement because I'm feeding my electric body and taking care of my electric health. We're going to talk about that a bunch in the workshop tomorrow, but I will go into it a little bit here. So this is just an image. Now that we've kind of explored this idea of plasma and the electric body, this is the idea. The red spots are hot spots. Those are traumatic memories. And when you find those in the field, you just stay in them, and the chaos resolves into harmony. And then the energy that's stuck in that hot spot, you can use a tuning fork to simply guide it back into this central channel and back into flow. And so the more your field is combed through and these hot spots are resolved, you can see as they go in, the brightness, the overall brightness of the field brightens, okay? So that's what I talk about when I talk about raising your voltage, okay? Raising your voltage, and how that is this is key in electric health. There's a lot of talk, people talk about raising your vibration, and that is not a phrase that I use. Because it's technically incorrect, okay? So for me, as a sound researcher and as an author, I'm always really interested in the sounds that we use and how the words we use make us feel. So when we talk about raising our vibration, there's very often this kind of feeling that goes along with it, like this. And this idea that higher is better than lower. Okay, that's a very linear kind of hierarchical way of looking at things, and that isn't really how the universe works. We don't we want, yes, there is true that when we're connected to source, there is a kind of upliftment that happens in our soul. When we're happy, there can be a sense of upliftment, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But we also want to stay deeply embodied. Like health isn't an up and out, it isn't an ascension kind of thing, it's a descension into our bellies, into embodiment. Like true deep embodiment is bliss. It just is. But if we've had any kind of physical, mental, emotional, sexual abuse, then what ends up with is the accumulation of what Eckhart Tolle calls our pain body. And what is our pain body but just all these places where we've contracted and we're in distortion? And then that becomes what we associate with. We become our distortion. Right? We've all met people who lead with their pain, and they're just like, so we don't, and then there's this feeling like you just want to rise above it, right? Or I just want to kind of get out of here because this all sucks. But what we really want to do, where health and freedom really lie, isn't in any kind of ascension or even raising our vibration. It comes from clarifying our vibration, bringing our vibration in tune, right? And we want to expand our consciousness. We don't want to just go up. You can expand your consciousness in every direction, from the center out. Hold your center. Radiate expansion, right? Bring your electrical body, your acoustic being, the music that you are, into tune. We want to tune our vibration. We want to find our vibrational sweet spot and live from that. And that's a place where we are routinely having the experience of what we call coherent emotions. When we're at liberty to feel love, gratitude, appreciation, compassion, contentment, those are the emotional states where your body is groovy, right? We were singing the other night, every little cell in my body is healthy. Every little cell in my body is well. The only way that happens is if you're groovy. Now, it's really hard to think yourself into that place if you've had a lot of trauma or you've had a lot of ancestral trauma. No matter how hard you try, sometimes it can be really hard to quiet that noise in the signal. Right? And so this is where tuning forks are so useful. And there's certainly other forms of healing as well that do the same thing. But tuning forks are a very kind of quick and easy and elegant way to just take a bigger breath, relax and breathe. Because that's how we get to that place, is simply by relaxing deeply and breathing and bringing ourselves back to the natural harmony that we're all designed for. Every single person that I've ever worked on, I have been astonished, over and over and over again, to see how amazing we each are, to see how beautiful everyone is, how gifted everyone is. Every single person, when I look deeply and listen deeply into their soul, I'm amazed. And I reflect back to them. I'm like, oh my God, look at you. You are so amazing in this way. And every single person that I've ever reflected their own greatness back to has looked at me shyly and said, I know that. But how many of us get the gift of someone looking deeply into the essence of who we are, seeing our greatness and reflecting it back to us? How often does that happen? And so we become very shy about our own amazingness and we keep it hidden. But everybody knows, you know, how amazing you are and the amazing gifts that Source has given you. right? So part of freedom is getting to the place where we can freely enjoy our own gifts, admit to how great they are, and to share them with other people. And that is not easy to do. I have to tell you that it was probably 10 years of me tuning, people part-time and coming home and saying to my husband, like, wow, this person was great and this person was amazing. And he was like, what, is everybody great? And I was like, yeah. But then it wasn't like, seriously, it took 10 years for it to dawn on me. I remember standing there one day and being like, oh my God, if everybody is great and amazing, then I must be too. Like, we're that blinded to it. It is that hard for us to accept our own greatness that I could see it in person after person after person. And it still didn't even occur to me that I had the same amazing brilliance that everybody does. And, the fact of the matter is, we just get a whole lot of shit heaped on us. That's really what obstructs it. Lies, misinformation, half-truths, ancestral wounding, parents not having any idea, what emotional intelligence is. We're all carrying around a lot of static, but underneath that, there is just amazing beauty in everybody. So in the workshop tomorrow, I'm going to do a group healing and demonstration. So you'll get to see what a session like this looks like and also get to experience it. And it can be pretty amazing what can happen through Zoom. You wouldn't think that it could be, but no, you guys would think. I don't need to explain it to you. Let me come back to my slides and see what else we've got, and then we can get into some Q&A once we get through all this, and we're almost there. Okay, so once again, if you didn't get a picture of that before, you can, and just kind of thinking about the toroidal structure, the waves right here, right, and where these memories live. And here's the thing, like, people can learn to do, you can learn this work very quickly. Like, you can figure out moving a fork through the field, finding these areas and moving them. It is absurdly simple to learn how to do this. It's a minute to learn and a lifetime to master, because there's definitely nuances in the sound, and I'll talk about those tomorrow, like some of the basic languages. But I've learned, extremely detailed information about the vibrational language, which is pretty cool. I'm going to share with you tomorrow about the sonic slider, and I'll show you how to use it for self-care and also to use on others as well. And this is just to let you know that I'm working on research. I have partnered with Consciousness and Healing Initiative. We did a study last year. We had 15 volunteers, each received 3 biofield tuning sessions at a distance, 1 a week for 3 weeks, and to test them for how it affected their anxiety. So what it did was it just backed up what I've seen in clinical research for decades now, that biofield tuning works amazingly for anxiety. Every single one of the volunteers came out of it no longer having clinical anxiety. Every single marker across the board, and we did some very innovative data collection, shows a dramatic drop in these people's experience of anxiety. So that's very, very powerful. And we're going to be doing a larger study later this year with 60 volunteers and a control group as well. So doing the science to advance not only biofield therapies, but also distance work. There's many, many people stuck at home feeling anxious, and help is available. I've also partnered with IONS. We're conducting a study that just got underway to see if this sonic slider tuning fork can help increase bone density. And what's neat about IONS is they have a portal that people have to fill out all of these questionnaires asking about their overall sense of well-being, how they look at the world, even things like their sense of intuition and synchronicity. And so they'll be filling out those questionnaires before and after. Now, we had thousands of people buy the sonic slider. It's based in the Schumann resonance, and everybody reports, not everybody, we don't want to use phrases like that, but a great many people report they have an improved sense of well-being, and that they experience increased synchronicities, which I find really interesting, along with many other benefits as well. And it's just a tool to help you to be more coherent and induce flow. And so soon we'll still have some good data about that as well. And I definitely plan on continuing to do research in this field in order to scientifically support the fact that everything is electric. So part of this transition from this chemical mechanical world of separation we've been in is moving to thinking electrically. And there's a couple of easy ways to kind of switch gears around that. One is this idea of body pH, about how we don't want our pH to get too low, because because that's where disease happens, right? Disease happens in a low pH state. Well, pH and voltage are the same thing. Low pH is the same thing as having a low battery, okay? Almost all disease occurs because our battery, the amount of voltage or current running through our system, is too low. Okay, so imagine for a moment that you have a little battery meter, and it goes from a scale of 1 to 100. Okay, so at 100, you're completely optimized. Like, that is the maximum efficiency you can run at. And 1, 0 is obviously you're not here anymore. So ask yourself right now, on a scale of 1 to 100, where is your battery meter at? Okay. And usually with people, it drops right in. So if you want to drop it in the chat, do that. Let me know where your battery meter is at. Okay. Now, what I find is that most people run between 60 and 80. That's where most people run. Okay. But it really, people can land anywhere. Now, if you are not running between 90 and 100%, so that's where I do my best to keep myself so that I'm always running between 90 and 100%. Because when I do that, I have energy all day. I have focus, I have clarity, I have drive, I have the ability to step back and see the big picture. I have the ability to stay more patient. My fuse gets much longer. I have the ability to have a sense of humor in a difficult situation, always a win to approach things in that way. Yes, the ions bone density study is using my tuning forks. It's got a quick question there. We'll come back to your questions in just a few minutes because I'm almost done. So if your battery meter is too low, think about it like if you had a business with 100 employees, right? And jobs for 100 people, and only 60 people are showing up to work every day. Like, what is going on in your business? Not good, right? Not good at all. So how do you get your battery meter back up? Well, if you're low, I can pretty much guarantee you that you are discharging more than you are recharging. You are giving more than you are receiving. You are saying yes when you mean no, when your body says no. You are not letting yourself do things like take naps. You might not be sleeping well because your adrenals are cranked and maybe you're like tired and wired, okay? But, oh yeah, that's right. You can all douse, what your battery meter is at. That's pretty good. So I trust your guys' results more than most crowds. Yeah, so I want, when you start thinking about your battery meter, okay, and then you can think about things like, okay, if I think about doing something, does it make me go, ah, or does it make me go, right? And you can guess, like, what makes your battery meter go up? It's those ah things. What makes your battery meter go down? It's those things. Why are you doing all these things? Like, do you need to? Like, and believe me, I went through a period where I took care of my mom when she was dying and died, and then my dad for 3 years, and that crossed over with having a baby and taking care of my dad and a baby and 2 businesses. Like, there was a lot of going on, and there wasn't much I could do about it. So I know that sometimes life puts us in situations where we don't have any choice, but those are the places more than anywhere where we absolutely need to take care of ourselves. My dad had a stroke when I was 10. He was 59 and my mom was 49. And he became completely paralyzed on his right side. And the reason I think my dad had a stroke was that he didn't manage stress well. He didn't manage stress well. You know, even the CDC says 85% of disease is caused by stress. What is stress? Stress is the mismanagement of your emotions. It is the mismanagement of how you feel. My dad didn't manage it well at all. He went, oh, and had a stroke. And then my mom had to take care of him. And you know what? My mom was one of those people who put everybody else first. She put everybody else first. Raise your hand if you're one of those people. You put everybody else first and put yourself last. Guaranteed to lower your voltage. And you know what? If you are always giving and not receiving, I'll tell you something. Something happens to you. And that is that at some point you have to receive that backlog of all the help that you didn't. Because karma comes around, goes around. And so often the way we end up receiving it is not the way we want to be receiving it. Right? So you have an obligation to take care of your own health and well-being, to put yourself first every place you can. Because the more you do that and the more your battery meter goes up, the better you can take care of everyone around you. This putting ourselves last, this service above self, okay? And I watched my mom do that. She never took a day off. She never went out for a ladies' lunch. She never did anything except work, 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 and take care of everybody. And every couple of months, she'd get a migraine, and she'd end up spending the day on the couch, all right? We all thought at some point my dad would die and my mom would get a life back. That's not what happened. 66% of caregivers die before the people they are taking care of. And that is exactly what happened to my mother. And so I made a really big commitment that I was going to figure out how to manage my stress and how to take care of myself and my own health and well-being so that I didn't become a burden to the people around me because I wasn't successful in taking care of myself. Okay, it's a kind of a radical way to think about it. I want to give you permission to recharge. I want to give you permission to maximize your electric health. And you can, I have created tools. And again, tomorrow I'll talk about all of the different tools. I'm going to go really in depth in all the ways that, and they're simple ways, like sing more and go barefoot, which you probably already know. But then, there's other stuff as well. And the single best thing that you can do for your health is to start to raise your battery meter and to become more coherent. And and the cool thing about becoming more coherent is you kind of can fake it. Like all you have to do is think about something that you're really grateful for. All you have to do is think about somebody that you really appreciate. If you're connected to Source and you have a loving relationship with Source, all you have to do is just go there. And you become more coherent. You become more clear. So it isn't really that hard. It's just that we've been taught that it's harder than it really is. Electric health is a lot easier than chemical mechanical health. Okay, so let me come back. I think this is the last slide. Okay, so this is my contact information. If you guys want, electrichealth.com has all kinds of information. There is peer-reviewed science on biofield therapies, dozens of peer-reviewed articles about that if you're interested in knowing more about that. There's also dozens of articles from mainstream publications about the electric nature of life, the universe, and everything. Kind of eye-opening when you really start to dive deep. Also at the Biofield Tuning Store, we have group biofield tuning sessions that you can listen to. For example, I have an adrenal reset series that works with the adrenals and their rhythm and helps them to settle down. So if you've got a tired and wired thing going on, these 3 one-hour recordings might help you to feel better. Many people claim that they've helped. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. And if any of your questions tonight don't get answered, feel free to pop me an email, and I do my best to help answer questions for people. I love sharing what I've learned here because, what I've shared with you are the things that have helped me to become more empowered, more energized, and I don't really like to use the word, it's not a word I use lightly, but I would say just happier, more content, more at ease in the world. A lot of us spend a lot of time and energy fussing, and that's when we're in the noise in our signal. And 99% of the time, we actually don't need to be fussing. We could be in a state of harmony. And so the more that we can bring ourselves into that, the healthier we're going to be. And that's going to benefit everybody around us, right? Because remember that our vibes spread out into the world around us. And I think what I'd like to leave you with is my new favorite word, which is appreciate and appreciation. There's been a lot of studies done on what we call gratitude, and has really demonstrated that people's well-being really baseline really goes up when they develop a daily practice of gratitude. And I want you to think about something or someone that you're grateful for, and what that feeling feels like in the body. And very often it's this kind of pulling in and up. It's a this sort of feeling. When we appreciate someone or something, there's an extension of our own electrical energy. It flows out of us and flows to that person or object. We engage electromagnetically. We connect when we appreciate. And so I want you to just take a moment now, just feel what it feels like to appreciate the organizers of this conference, just appreciate the community that you're part of, like the long standing, 61 years of a tradition is pretty amazing. To just appreciate all of the people who have helped to make this happen. I know that I appreciated White Eagle so much the other night when in his opening ceremony. I was very moved to tears by the grace that he embodies. I know anytime I see a beautiful soul and all the grace, that there's such a sense of being moved, and in that appreciation, reaching out and connecting. And so when we move through life in the spirit of appreciation, we bring out the best in the people around us. We very much exist in the space between each other. In the electromagnetic interactions, different people bring out different parts of us. We all know that. And so when you're being appreciated, it brings out what is the best in you, right? When you are appreciating something, you are bringing that out. And the world being the great big mess that it is, we need every single one of us to move through the world in a coherent state. And that means even appreciating those who, might be on the other side, if you will, right? We can't even like what seems like destructive or evil things going on. Remember, it's all waves in space, and sometimes we take things a little too seriously, not to take away from the gravity of human suffering, because every moment that anyone is suffering matters. And any moments that people have been relieved of that suffering matters, right? So that's really true. But we also, what I want to say is, you cannot have a protagonist. You cannot have a hero. You cannot have the person who comes and helps to heal or to fix if there wasn't the antagonist or the mess maker or the wounder also present, right? Like we can't rise to the experience of our full potential as whatever it is unless there's some kind of adversity that's happening, unless there's some kind of difficulty. So we even want to appreciate the contrast in life. We want to appreciate the antagonists for helping us to be a protagonist. Right. So we can even bring that spirit of appreciation into like every nook and cranny of our human experience. And that's going to bring you into a more coherent state. And it's going to naturally bring the people, the animals, the situations that you encounter into a more coherent state. And the more we all do that, the more coherent this world will become. And I do have faith in our human potential to embody and live the harmony that is fundamentally exactly at the core of who we are. So believe in that. Believe in your own harmony. Believe in your own greatness. Appreciate yourself and appreciate the world around you. Great. Okay. Thank you so much, guys. And I'm happy to take some questions. So,
Eileen,
Lisa,
Eileen, how would you like to take them?
let's see. I think it's easiest, Sheila, if you just read the ones that are popping up. So just put them in the chat, and or if there's already been some that you can scroll back to while other ones are populating.
Oh, for sure.
Most
Craig,
time efficient to do it
yeah,
that way.
Craig James wrote a dissertation back around 821.
I think that Craig is right here in Vermont. Maybe he needs to come visit me in my
Yeah,
office.
he was asking about Rife machines, which excite noble gas to acquire plasma state, which becomes a
Yes.
carrier, EMF, which is modulated by an audible frequency. He suspects your biofield EMF travels down your arm and is modulated by the tuning fork, creating a Rife-like effect. What do you think?
Well,
There's
my
there's more.
understanding. Oh, there's more. Wait, I can only answer one question at a time because I
No,
always
no,
forget.
I meant the biological structure's geometry resonate at frequencies that resonate with the frequency of the particular tuning fork you're using.
Okay, that's not a question.
So,
Okay.
no, so the perceived loudness could be due to resonance with the cellular geometry you are probing. It's like two or three things packed in together.
Yes, I mean all of that. I would say, as far as Rife machines go, what Rife did was he figured out what he called the mortal oscillatory rate, or the MOR, of particular organisms. And then what he would do is he would use this plasma tube that he would direct electric current through at that very specific frequency, so that he would basically encounter these pathogens and zap them with their own frequency to the point where they became so full of that frequency that they would explode. Okay, so the same idea as like a opera singer shattering a wine glass. Um, that's warfare, that's pretty destructive. Personally, I would rather harmonize the terrain than blast perceived pathogens. So I don't necessarily think biofield tuning is behaving in the same way as a Rife machine, because the Rife machine is intent on destroying perceived enemies, whereas biofield tuning is focused on strengthening and harmonizing the terrain so that the body deals with whatever is going on the way that the body deals with it. So that's kind of the fundamental difference there.
Your energy is amazing.
Well, that's what happens when you take care of your electric health, and it's really it is accessible for anyone. And certainly, if you want to know more about it, there's also my book, Electric Body, Electric Health. The biofield anatomy chart is in my latest book.
Okay. I think it might be time to
say
say
goodnight.
Miigwech, Miigwech, Miigwech.
Miigwech. Yes. All right. Thank you all so much, and I look forward to seeing some of you tomorrow. It's a pleasure. Thanks for being with me here tonight.
Thank you, Eileen. Thank you,
You bet.
everyone.